Electric Funk from F9 Audio is available now. Over 5 gigabytes of pure retro funk. This, without any doubt, is our most detailed and comprehensive sample pack to date. It comes in 3 zip files because it is just too much information to be able to supply to you on one. Now, I know a lot of you guys, like me, absolutely adore this style of music, and we wanted to make the most authentic sounding pack that's currently available today. So how do we do it? Well, we went back and we carefully researched how all of this music was recorded in the time. We looked into the drum machines, the synths, all the devices that we used and the different technologies within recording, brought them into this studio and then carefully pieced together an enormous quantity of music for you. The most important thing for us on this pack was to make sure that anybody, no matter what their DAW, had access to the fantastic material that we created with it. And we think we've nailed it with this new WAV stem format. We do actually have direct DAW support for Ableton, for Logic, for Cubase, for Presonus Studio One and Reason. But even if you don't use those DAWs, the WAV stems will instantly go into anything that you're using, and they're all leveled in a way that you can start working perfectly with them. Now, we could sit and talk about this all day, but I'm pretty sure most of you are keen to hear the music. So let's just dive straight into the funk. So we're in Logic, and this is the first project that we're going to look at. It's called DMX, it's 114 BPM. And what you are seeing and listening to right there is exactly what this release is about. We wanted to give you that magical feeling as if you're opening up original multi-track recordings from this era. And we cannot do that with samples and loops. It's impossible to do. We can teach you so much more with this because you can see exactly how all of the different production elements work against each other, how they should be mixed together, which sonic signature they have, and also how you can build a production in terms of additional parts coming in. And also, as you've heard there, those changes. Every single one of the 14 stem sets in this pack has a B section. In other words, it has a major musical change in it. So effectively, you've got 28 different musical ideas contained within the entire pack. Also, as you can see, we've really split these projects up, particularly in terms of drums. Let me just solo them and play them back from the middle. Perfectly processed drums, but not at all overcooked. Now let me show you some of the percussion elements. We spent over a week recording live percussion for this entire set. You couldn't survive in production in this era without being an incredible musician. And most of the guys that are involved in the production just used to program the drum machines and then play to tape. Hardly any sequences involved. And we've tried to keep the spirit of that as much as possible. The quantize button has been firmly off with some careful editing afterwards to keep that live vibe. But most importantly, also, these bass parts are evolving. They are not just built on 1 or 2 bar loops. There's masses of variation to be had there. Wherever humanly possible on this pack, we also captured the MIDI files, and they are provided in their entirety. So I'm in Logic's browser now, I'm in the project folder, and you can see there's a MIDI file folder within that. I can open that and then just pick up the main bass part that made this track and dump it down onto a spare instrument channel. I really encourage you to investigate these MIDI files in great detail. See how we've kept some of that live feel, how coming off grid slightly can really help. See how we're sliding off certain notes and why that works. See why certain notes, particularly in bass lines, really jump out. How we're doing all of the bass slides and how we're getting all of those complex chord voicings. More on that a little bit later on. Now, in the Logic folders, you'll notice there are two versions of each project, and the second one has the word flex in the title. This means that when you open these, flex time is applied to all of the stemmed audio. We've used rhythmic or slicing flex mode for all of the drums and polyphonic for anything else, and they sound great. Now, just to show you how successful this can be, I've actually put a series of master channel tempo moves across this DMX project. Have a listen. So I'm pretty sure that's already got a few of your brains ticking away. And I'm going to be fascinated to see just how far you guys push this material. Okay, so now over to Ableton, and this is another one of the projects. This is electric at 120 BPM. Just a quick word on compatibility. You can see here that I'm in Live 9, but it's perfectly fine for Live 10 as well. And in fact, we've gone all the way back to Live 9.1 to build these projects. You can see here I'm in Live 9.17. Now, once again, we can actually change the tempo. Everything on this page is pre-warped. So the original is at 120. Let's run this project at 110. Or at, say, 126. And we have selected all of the drums into Beats Warping and all of the rest of the music into Complex Pro. You don't have to change projects inside of Ableton because this is Ableton's normal behavior, obviously. But one thing we would suggest is that if you don't want to change the tempo, just select everything and turn the warps off. Ableton does sound a tiny bit better when it's not having to do all of that processing. And as we mentioned earlier, we've got this great variation within the material. So just check out here how the bass line lifts up into the next section. To my knowledge, there's absolutely no loop-based product that can show you this, and this is why I'm really hoping this is going to be an educational tool as well. You can get to the next section just using musical changes and variation in your performances, and hopefully all the MIDI files will really give you some ideas. Now, of course, you may just want to use certain parts out of the production, so let's take four sounds here. We've got the funk guitars, the poly stabs, and mellow pads, and a chord rise. So say we wanted to make a new disco track out of that, we could get rid of absolutely everything else, change the tempo, say to 122, and we're off and running. And this project, like every single one of them, has an incredibly detailed selection of drum stems. So if you wanted to start again and just have a backbeat to start working from, you could clear out all the music and just work to this. Now, whilst we're here, there is one thing I do want to say about the kicks. The kicks in this pack are deliberately designed to be of this era. Modern kicks have an awful lot more sub-information, they are longer and more powerful. So by all means, feel free to strip the kick out of the mix and replace it with something more modern. So let's have a look at another one of the projects. This is Grand Central and we're inside Studio One. So another project with a great breadth of different musical ideas in there, but I've just heard an interesting little loop that might be really useful in the last few bars. Now, if I can just bring your attention over to the browser inside of Studio One, you'll see that there are two versions of the projects once more, and the TS version, that TS stands for time stretch, so time stretch is applied perfectly on all of the tracks, so we can change the tempo. Now, the bit I'm actually interested in this project is just looping the last two bars. So I'm going to loop the second to last bar first. I've changed the tempo here to 122, so it's sped up slightly using the time stretch projects. Now, the bass isn't really working as an interesting loop, so let's pull that out. But just those two bars there sound like they might be an interesting beginning to a filtered house or disco production. And I really encourage you to go through every single bit of the material to look for these kind of things. You'll probably find a couple of unicorns, some loops that just work perfectly and could be the basis for some awesome club productions. And now into Reason, and this is one of my favourite projects within the entire release. This is Cadillac 114 BPM. Now you hear on this production that when we come up to a big chord, we're actually spreading the notes of the chord across the bar line in the same way that a guitarist might slowly strum the strings of a guitar. It's a great little production tip, and we're going to have a separate video called What We Learned, all about the different tricks and techniques we discovered whilst we were creating this pack. So do look out for that. Now, whilst we're here in Reason, do remember that Reason is always in time stretch mode. So let's just take this straight up to 120 BPM. So it's perfect for this. And also don't forget in Reason, you've got this amazing SSL modeled EQ, which is perfect for this kind of material. One extra thing, if you're loving the sound of some of the synths in this production, we went on a massive multi-sampling mission during its creation. We generated about, I think, 7 gigabytes worth of raw data that we're just starting to go through now. These will be made available as a separate release later on called Electro Funk Instruments, but by buying this pack, you will get a 40% discount voucher for that release. There's a ton of Cubase users out there, and we're very proud to have Cubase supported in this release. And we've actually built them in Cubase 7 to support as many users as possible. This is the project called Eastwood, 116 BPM. The only thing we would say about the Cubase versions is that because we built them in 7, we weren't able to apply Vary Audio. So if you do want to use the tempo changes, simply apply Vary Audio to all of the different parts, using the selective modes that work best for the material. So we've now covered our 5 principal DAWs, but please don't worry if you don't use any of them. We have formatted this pack as WAV stems for one very good reason, so that anybody can use the material. Simply open your DAW of choice, set the tempo correctly, and bearing in mind all of the project tempos are clearly marked on the folders, and then drop the stems so that they all start at the same bar on different tracks. Here I've done exactly that for one of the projects with Harrison's odd little DAW called Mixbus. Now, if you've never used this system before, I warn you now, it is an odd looking thing. I'm sorry if that gets back to anyone at Harrison, but come on guys, this is not what modern DAWs look like. However, do not be fooled. This is the most analog sounding DAW in existence, and I don't know a single person who's heard it that thinks any different. These guys are the desk manufacturers that created the desk that Thriller was mixed on. Now, if you've never come across this DAW before, even though it looks dreadful, and I'm sorry Harrison, it absolutely does, do not be fooled. This is the most analog sounding DAW in existence. And what is unique about it is that it has parallel processing built in. On the right hand side here, we can see a number of what are known as mix buses, and I've sent every single one of the main audio tracks to it. I've got it in solo at the moment, and we're going to do some heavy-handed processing. I've already got a touch of EQ, but let's go crazy with it. So I'm slamming it with some tough EQ and some tape drive there. All of the mix buses have a tape saturation control. I've also using this control just down here to add some fierce compression to it. And look at what happens is now when I take the solo off and feed it from the bottom of the fader run a little bit up, so you get some of this parallel processing into the track. So who doesn't want a bit of that in their life? This system has been a secret weapon of mine, particularly when it comes to mastering or finishing off tracks. I've got an entire mastering workflow coming soon, so please look out for that on our YouTube. Now let's start to look at some of the other zips in this collection. Zip 2 probably needs the least explanation. It is a traditionally formatted sample pack. So we've taken all of the stems, done a series of cuts to find the very best loops in it, extracted all of those audio parts and normalized them and formatted them in the kind of sample packs we are all used to, and I'm sure you guys, like me, have hundreds of already. Now, what is particularly handy with all of this, let's just look into the sequences. You can see that we've added the tempo information and the key where it's actually important, but we've also kept in the actual project names. So say you found something like this that you quite like the sound of, Twin C Movement Synths 2. All you've got to do is take the project name and do a search within the folder, and you'll find all the related loops. There, these are all the loops and the sounds that come from that project. So it's very easy to find material that's going to work together. But if you ask me, the star of the show here are the one-shot hits. We went through and meticulously edited every single drum sound, every single effect sound, and all of the melodic content to pull out chord chops, synth hits, synth effects, bass notes, you name it. Anything that was useful has been extracted and is available as a one-shot. They're also sorted here by key. Now, the bulk of the material in this entire pack is in E minor. There is a very good reason why E minor is synonymous with funk. Ever since the 50s and 60s, the lowest note that you could get out of an electric bass in standard tuning was E. So a lot of the funk musicians tended to write around E because even back then we were still aiming to get the lowest and fattest bass tones so that the music would sound great when played up on a big system. So E minor has become synonymous with funk and disco over the years, and it's a great key to get your head round. Now, a quick look in the drum and effects hits. We've got all the usual suspects in here: tambourines, snares, percussion, a massive amount of percussion, by the way. Let me just do a quick check. 102 live percussion sounds. Drum machine hits, all the things from Simmons toms all the way up to Linn and LM1 hits. What we got there, 81 of them. Claps, oh, and claptrap, right. Now, there was a very special device that came out in the mid-80s called the claptrap by drum company Simmons. Now, if you've ever seen those big hexagonal electronic pads that were played by the drummers of that era, this company made the claptrap. It was basically a mixture of a odd little digital sample and a tuned noise source, and was designed to make thick claps. And we've used it extensively here. Now, for those of you that got our recent Facebook free download of claptrap samples, they were completely separate recordings. So if you do get this pack and you have that already, you are going to be claptrap rich. If you don't know what I'm talking about, simply type claptrap or Simmons claptrap into Facebook's search bar and see if you can find our post. All you've got to do is leave a comment on the actual Facebook post, and a messenger automation system will deliver you the right format for your computer. Okay, now the fun really starts. We took every single one of the drum hits, the effects hits, and the enormous quantity of chopped up melodic hits, and loaded them into sound menus for all of the main samplers. You can see all of the usual suspects there, but we've also included some brand new ones, including MPC V2. Now, that was fitting. I absolutely love my MPC X, and it was instrumental in the creation of this pack because nothing sounds like it for drums. So we've actually created our very first MPC expansion, which you can load into the MPC and start working on straight away. Now, whilst we're on the subject of drum samplers, formatting this for Machine 2 turned out to be a little bit of a headache because we have literally hundreds and hundreds of one-shots here, and we would just create so many groups it would be unmanageable. So we've actually formatted this in a slightly different way. We have used key grouping to set all of the samples up across the keyboard. So that means they can be loaded into one sample slot. So an entire menu of sounds, for example, this is Drum Machine Hits B, can go onto one single sound slot in a group. And as soon as you press the keyboard mode on Machine and use the octave up and down buttons, you can access all of the different sounds. Of course, if you've got a MIDI keyboard connected to Machine, it gets even more powerful. So I think the best thing for me to do to show you some of these sampler patches is to head into Contact. Please note, none of the F9 Contact patches ever use the Libraries tab in Contact. To do so would mean encoding the libraries with native instruments. That would cost an absolute fortune, pushing the prices of all of these packs with Contact support up to about £79 or £99. Not prepared to do that. So you can just access the NKIs straight through the file browser, or even better, add them to your Contact quick load menu. Now, I won't go through that here. We have a separate video on our YouTube channel showing you exactly how to set that up, and I really do encourage you to have a look. So I've loaded up here the F9 Electric Funk Chord Hits E minor 1 menu, and spread across the keyboard are a whole series of different chords that would work in the key E minor. And let me show you some of the controls. Basic attack and release. Non-lin adds a 80s non-linear reverb, like a gated reverb to things. Stretch is pretty interesting. You turn it to the left, the sound goes into the time stretch engine and slows right down. To the right, it will speed it right up. So you can get some great effects just by mucking around with those controls. Saturation. Stereo will widen the thing right up. Low pass filter and high pass filter controls. And resonance controls for both the filters. So it is actually a fairly comprehensive selection of little controls there that are easily set up within the automation of Kontakt 2. Obviously the drum hits are there, but I do have a slight confession to make. We've got a bit of a mistake on one of the scriptings on the early versions of this, so if it loads up and on your drums you still have stretch, that is actually a whole reverb just for the drums. We will get that fixed ASAP, and whoever made that mistake is currently being flogged in the outside part of the studio in full view of the general public. I've only shown you 2 of the sampler patches there, but I'm sure you can see the potential. We're actually going to sign off because this video is starting to get epic again, and we are going to do a completely separate video showing you how to use this pack in ways that you may not have instantly have thought of. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. We really hope you love this pack, and we'll see you next time.